Welcome to Conversations with Contemporary Artists, Hudson Presents. It's a show that my director, Michelle Vital, dreamed up one night, and I'm lucky enough to host this pretty much every month with an artist that in some cases I've known them for many years. In some cases they're very new to me. Tonight I have painter Yana Dimitrova, who I've known for quite a while, although not as well as I would like to. So tonight is a good place and a good time for us to have a little conversation about what she does and why she does it. So I'm happy that you folks wanted to join us tonight. And a little shout out to Summer Dawn, who is our technical specialist, and will be this semester putting these things on YouTube as sort of like a whole season. So again, I will do my best to let you folks know through Instagram and through the e-blasts that I put out. My name is Michael Lee. I'm going to let Yana take the stage here in 2 seconds. What else do I have to say to set us up? I guess maybe nothing. So please help me welcome Yana Dimitrova. Yana, thanks very much for wanting to do this.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being part of the community, being part of the lecture series. I'm sorry there's lots of background noise. This is an open space. I'm in my studio, and it is, it's not fully open, but the walls don't quite go all the way to the highest point of the ceiling. So you can hear lots of noise, and we have open studio tomorrow, so it's really exciting.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you so much for being here on a Friday night. I'm very happy to share some slides. I have, in fact, a few slides of paintings of mine, and I would say a few more recent things I've been making in the past maybe 3 or 4 years maximum. And yeah, I would love some comments, some questions. So if anyone has anything they'd like to add, I'll be very happy to, or pass questions. Feel free, maybe use the chat, as you said, Mike. That will be no problem.
Oh yeah, let me just make a little note. If you folks have questions that come up as we're talking, put them into the chat, and then we'll break for enough time so that we can try to field questions at the end. So, questions, comments, whatever they are, and I'll try to just read through that chat when we get to, if I can speak tonight, when we get done.
Wonderful.
Well,
please.
Yana, make a plug for where is your studio?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to say that I'm a little frustrated because the studio is in the Brooklyn Army Terminal. The open studios are Saturday and Sunday, so tomorrow and the day after tomorrow from 1 till 5. You do have to be vaccinated to enter, so that's something I forgot to say on my e-blast earlier. But it is like I said, it is a whole weekend event. There is, I want to say something like 90 studios in their 2 giant buildings. And there's about 90 studios, but there's an entire program for Sunset Park artists, and it's called Sunset Park Open in this part of Sunset Park, I suppose, which is in Brooklyn, South Brooklyn. And today actually I came in to my studio right after work. I walked in and there were people who just replaced my lights with this very bright kind of bluish fluorescent light, coolish fluorescent light. So everything changed for me. So I had to shift my entire, so I'm surrounded with stuff that I need a little more time to just put away properly. So sorry for the mess.
Well, the nice thing is that, we're going to be looking at some images of your work that were shot with beautiful lights.
Yes.
This is something that, I know you folks out in the audience have probably noticed in the last several years. a lot of galleries are switching over to fluorescent lighting. I was just at
Really?
a gallery. I was at Casey Kaplan the other day when I got back from school, and I tried to take a picture of a painting, and I was like, "Why is it blue?" It's
Mm,
because the phone is picking up that strange light. Um, but what was I going to say? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to read the chat already, and I shouldn't do that. So I'm going to get rid of the chat.
don't do that.
Okay. Um, and we'll focus on color, right?
Sure.
I'm thinking of like the other, the things that I think of when I look at your work, and like, unlike me, who's like Mr. Monochrome guy, um, you really use, like, like beautiful, vibrant, lush color. I mean, in the stuff that's behind you, but also
That's
in the
funny.
things that you do, as a more like public art
Mm,
projects. So I know you wanted to start talking a little bit about not the most recent project, um, but one that involves, where you're originally from, one that
sure.
involves, relatives and like sort of like deep connections.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll let you sort of have like a tiny synopsis of like, where are you from? Why are you here now?
Thank you, Michael. Maybe I can share my screen then so that I
Yeah, of
can
course.
introduce, yeah, everything. Um, Hopefully my computer won't just go into shambles, as they say. Another great expression. Um, is it okay if I play, just have this in a full screen, maybe? So I'm just gonna, in that case, I'm gonna go to that one project we talked about just now. Okay, this is the project. So this is actually a mural design for a mural in a community center in Bulgaria. So I'm originally from Bulgaria, which is a small country in the middle of the Balkans, a little bit more east. Uh, I would say when it's like East Europe somehow. It's a yeah, so it's a very interesting experience for me personally to be in the United States and to kind of have this combination of experiences between my memory, what I'm remembering, my history, but also the stories that I've been hearing from my family members. And a lot of what I tried to do here was to record some of these stories just by looking, just by actually using folk songs as my reference and a conversation with a person who lives here in used to live in New York, but now lives in Chicago. She's a family member of mine, also connected to this tiny little village where my family comes from. And so what I did is I spoke with her. I asked her about specific songs that are kind of deep, very dark songs from my childhood. I remember my grandparents used to sing, and I just try to map them in a way that represents the experience. And I can go to the next slide just to show you a little more detail, just to try to capture these stories in a slightly bit more abstracted way with the elements from tapestry design from that very region, from my that little tiny region on the southwest border in Bulgaria. And what I did is I tried to color. It's funny you said talk a little bit about color. I tried to use the color as a way to represent the codes, or even just like the little emotions that we're going through, that or either my collaborator, the singer, was going through, or just the emotions that the conversation invoked. They're not very easy emotions. A lot of it is very heavy. But in contrast, I use the colors that are very earthy, but very much come from that tapestry tradition in that place. Yeah, so this is a project that in 2017. The image before was actually exhibited in a gallery. It's been exhibited in a few places, but this image comes directly from at Parsons School of Design. The forget the exact name, but the gallery at one of the galleries at
Yeah, yeah.
Parsons. Sheila Johnson, I think it's something like that. And it was a basically part of an exhibition that represented the kind of hyphened places that are mixed between imagination, memory, storytelling, in a place that once was, but maybe isn't exactly there the way that we remember it. So I know you asked this question, but maybe I should go back a little bit, or what do you think, Michael? Should I just keep going somehow?
I mean,
Or you have
why not? But
specific?
let me ask you one question.
Yeah,
This slide makes it look like those four small framed things contain nothing, but what is there text?
there is, right. There are
Are those the
actually
songs
the
or?
songs, yeah, the lyrics of the songs, but I actually wrote them, I believe in this case, I wrote them in English just to give a little context of what they mean, what they are. I just hand
Right.
wrote them in English. So because this is gouache on paper, and then I also had that table built specifically for the project, I wanted this to feel as a drafting table. Or not even a drafting table, but just like as you display a document, right? Like it feels like a drafting table, but it's something that you read it left to right, you kind of experience it in a certain personal manner, as opposed to, oh, and also your space of looking, it's constrained by just the space between your eyes and the paper. So that was kind of important to me, yeah.
Wow.
And then
No, go ahead.
well, it's funny because a lot of people have said that this, like right here, felt like a city because of the abstract language. But I should say, funny enough, I'm glad that the studio was a mess before I came here, but many of them come from very much from a specific tradition. And they do represent meaning. They're very abstracted, but they either come from nature, most often come from nature, and they might represent something like, if a flower has three little offshoots, that means a wish for prosperity or children, or they're very often kind of created as a something that would be a gift for a special occasion, like somebody gets moves and gets married or whatever it might be the occasion. There's a lot of times it's just celebrations.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I've always found interesting about a lot of visual abstract motif is that if you do enough reading, you realize that they really do come from, nature, stories that are like, like embedded within a particular culture, and they mean very specific things. I mean, I think of like the Greek key pattern, which just seems like, oh, it's just space filling. Well, yeah, it does that too, but it actually comes from like mazes, and like and all of the mythology about, sort of like, I mean, it's like kind of savage, right? Throwing a bunch of kids to like a mythical bull creature. But I mean, these things really go back a very, very long time, and where you're from, obviously, sort of like fraught with a lot of contested, histories, contested borders, and this is something that I feel like in this country, like we're just like, hello, we're just coming around to this idea of like, oh, there have been a lot of people here for thousands of years, and it's like maybe time to think about that. But so this comes out of like family, obviously. It comes out of like, really, really old and deep sort of like ripples in Bulgarian culture. And then, you've taken this idea, but then you've also done, and I don't want to jump ahead too far, but you've also done things that are about the culture where you live now, right?
Sure.
It's not like you just got off the boat. I mean, you've lived in New York for
Almost
over
10
2
years.
decades, right?
2 decades? I wouldn't say that. 10 years.
Only 10. Okay, for some reason I thought it was like almost 20. Okay, never mind.
In the United States, yeah, almost 18. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have to remember exactly the times now, simply because it feels like, once you get to New York, time goes so fast and you're working so much, and suddenly you're like, oh, it's been 10 years. Oh, it's been 20 years. So I
Oh,
need to check with myself. Anyway, I can actually exit if there's a specific image you want me to point at, because they're all here on the side. I'll be happy to.
Well, why don't we, this is a project that's sort of like, it's about you and family.
Hmm.
I would love to hear what you have to say about some of the things that are like now about like sort of like community as family, because that's been a big
Hmm.
facet of your
Hmm.
work in New York, right?
Right, absolutely. Well, it's a good question. I could probably just point you at some of my public work as well. But just to wrap up this project specifically, I had it the plan. So this is as a prototype, kind of, right? So this is a gouache painting, which is usually how I would make my murals. And I try to be as precise to the scale as possible. But what I actually did here is I planned it, and I need to go back, right, to the community center and produce it. Now, last year, I every year since 2017, since I produced this prototype, I've been thinking, okay, next year is my time. Next year's my time. And then COVID. First, it was finding the right grant money. Now I have the grant money, but COVID has created a big stop. So
Boy.
hopefully, I'm still really hoping that next summer I'll be able to go back and continue that. But again, this was a collaboration with one person ultimately, and of course with the community center. But we have these really interesting spaces there, and it seems to be quite a Bulgarian thing, even though again that territory where this is for, it's kind of contested. It's Macedonia and Bulgaria, and it has all these different nuances that it's a very interesting, unique place. But we have we have these places called reading rooms, and the reading rooms were established community centers that they're for the people by the people, meaning anyone could go and propose or do something in those spaces, to just simply, maybe it's a project, maybe they want to teach a class, maybe they want to take a class, but it's a lot of it has to do with exchange. There's some small fees if you're taking a class, or if you're taking some kind of service. But if anybody wants to propose a project, they are entitled to do it. It's usually in very, very small towns. It kind of serves as, like I said, a library, but especially most of the tiny little towns, they don't really have libraries. So it serves like multifunctional purpose for people in that area. And they also they're very much in like really rural, like workers places, like where most people would just be farmers, for example. So
Yeah.
that's what that village is. It's a tiny little village. It's I would say it's like 100 people, 100 and something people that live there. So my next stage really is to go there and produce this mural work in that community center. Um, and so just maybe to give a little bit more context how that has been feeding into the rest of my work, just because I see these slides right underneath, um, both of these pieces was just an attempt to try to make some of that abstraction and some of that symbolism as a form of storytelling that happens here that represents something,
Mhm.
to really become a language, to be part of a visual language. So the tapestry idea is keeps moving on somehow in my work, and those are two examples in oil and how I would do that in oil. But the more community-based work, the more strictly mural-based work. So this is a project I completed. Should I make it large again? I don't know if you
Sure.
guys can see. Yeah, you guys can see it okay. This is a project that I made in actually a hospital, thanks to the Tisch Foundation and also thanks to the health and medicine program at Health and Hospitals. I was, and of course, facilitated by Residency Unlimited. This whole program was really fantastic. They selected artists, a certain amount of artists per year that can go and partner with a hospital of one that has a already like an established partnership. And you basically work with the hospital in whichever way you find suiting, meaning your practice they already liked, you have been selected for it, and you have to try to figure out how do you tell the story that they are very much passionate about sharing, but also stories that you might discover along the way. So this project was so interesting because first of all, it's in Staten Island, and I don't live in Staten Island, so to me it was a little bit strange, right? Like,
Sure.
it's a real question. If you're not part of the community, how do you relate to the community, and what are some steps that you have to take? So I actually prolonged the period of time that the project really was supposed to happen. So I think I started well, initiated I think in June or July, and then finally ended up in 2020, and I finally was able to celebrate it January this year. So it really did take a lot longer. But the idea was really to kind of dig into the archives of the hospital, which, by the way, this was a hospital is called Seaview Hospital, part of an entire medical complex that was designed for during the tuberculosis pandemic, the TB pandemic. So it was really interesting that all the
How
stuff.
long ago was that? The TB pandemic of,
Well, so
uh,
let me go back. Let me go back. So at the actual location used to be a farm colony, um, as well as, it had gone through several uses, and then it was, I think, I want to say like early 1900s, very much so, like in 1930s, and it kind of in relationship to the WPA, because they also had some beautiful murals at that time. I believe so, like early 1930s. And so the spaces, or the complex, was beautiful, still is beautiful. Sadly, a lot of the buildings are abandoned. But so I try to immerse myself there as much as possible to learn. So that was a very different challenge, one in my community in Bulgaria, and then thinking about that very close relationship. And to me, even that project felt like I'm going to work on this mural design because that will bring me closer to home. While here, I was trying to bring home into the mural somehow, but also understand and learn and learn from the people, learn from the staff, learn from the former staff, learn from the history about the place. So it was amazing that, there's so much history to be told and to be discovered. So yeah, it was a real challenge, which is hence why the project really got kind of the timeline really had to be more
sure,
expanded.
sure. I mean, just looking at this one image, it absolutely makes me think of the WPA projects and the various murals that, some of them have been uncovered, some of them have been, pretty famously destroyed.
Hmm.
And like, a story, like something that like your grandmother or your mom could pass down to you, that's one kind of story. But then the idea of like having this very large story of a whole hospital, and of course the
Hmm.
administration with with frankly, an agenda, right?
Hmm.
To
Hmm.
promote themselves in a particular way. And I know that must be both interesting but a little tricky too, right? Because
It's
there's
very
certain
tricky.
things that they want. No, go ahead, put that slide up
No,
if
no,
you
no. I
want.
love hearing about this. No, please. Uh-huh.
Uh,
I clicked on something, and this window popped up in the front of my.
that sounds like what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do all the time. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, but
Right. So
like big stories, small stories, you're obviously
yeah,
drawn to storytelling in
yeah,
in various ways.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I just think about like artists,
Hmm.
you know, they're a dime a dozen. There's an artist all over the world. But, there's only so many artists who say to themselves, you know what, I'm going for the big time. I'm moving to New York City, right? Here you are, an artist in New York City, and you're doing like the most un-New York City artist thing. You know what I mean? It's like, this is like pure like citizen action. This is community. It just seems like it goes so against sort of like the mythology
Mm.
of like the climber. Like I'm gonna
Oh
be
yeah, yeah,
big.
yeah, yeah,
It's like you've really
yeah.
kind of turned that on its head. And I really, I have to say, thanks. Glad that you're doing stuff like this because it gives all of us like a better image.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say this, Mike, because I'm currently working on another project in another hospital. You could kind of peek through behind me some of that motifs. But and by the way, this is painted on Tyvek. Tyvek is it's a synthetic parachute cloth, so I can take it to my studio and paint that
Right.
piece, and then it gets assembled and installed on the wall with almost like a wallpaper. So it makes things a lot easier for like fine details, and it's really lovely technique. But yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. But I think, I when I first came to New York, I was really introduced to that. And I would even say like the reasons why I came to New York, it was from that place of community searching, not so much of not I mean, maybe to a degree, of course, we all wanted to like kind of learn what's happening and really to learn about the big art world that we've been hearing so much about, but also to be exposed to a lot of art that probably wouldn't have been able to be exposed to in such a firsthand experience as in New York City. You also have the most educated audience, in educated in a sense about the art world, who have been privileged enough to be able to see a lot of art already, in
Yeah,
that way.
for
In
sure.
that way. So, but no, but I started working. My first entry point in New York City was I started working with a very famous artist who we were pretty much painting his work. And that happens, a lot of us have to do this kind of work. You're painting, you're trying to replicate an image or a sketch or an idea that he had, and then suddenly I mean, you get burned out. I would go to my studio after my workday painting for someone else thinking, I don't want to do this. And suddenly it felt like that's a toxic thing to do. And I was ready for a change and already have the community mindset for myself, because that's the thing that I miss the most. Moving to the United States, especially in a more in the South, in Georgia, which is also a lovely place, but and we're grateful for to have had the opportunity. But because of the landscape and because of how everything is so spread out and because of the cultural differences, it's really hard to feel a true deep sense of community. And it takes a long time, unless if you're part of a institution, whether it's a religious institution or whatever it might be, it's really difficult. And I know my parents really had a hard time with that. Like they worked in a factory for a carpet factory, and they worked on the same machine that next to each other, and they were each other's community, and it was also just quite beautiful,
I was going to say, hold on for a second. They
but
were
also
they were
very difficult.
they were at machines. Is this when love bloomed, or did they get
Sorry.
the job after they were married? I'm sort of
Oh,
like
no,
have
no, no, they no no
I,
they no we they came when they came here, they were in their 50s. We were all yeah, in fact, I came last to the United States. They came here first and helped me by gaining a little bit of cash and money for me to actually be able to come and support. But it's a long and complicated and painful immigrant story, as I think most of them are.
I was going to say, yeah, many of them
Nothing
are.
different here. Yeah. But I think part of it is because of how difficult, and because of also maybe the community relationships I had in my family back home, I was always kind of drawn to that. So when I arrived to Seaview, and I really felt like, wow, there's a real connection. So I just want to point out the first panel was, you're right about the WPA. We looked at the historical trajectory. So from the first mural, first side was the farm colony and the history of basically a place where Seaview was a place that people could come from any walks of life who may have been homeless or may have had a hardship in their lives, and they could produce, learn a craft, earn money, and live in a beautiful location. And then from that point, then we moved to the Black Angels, which is the panel that you see in the middle. And in that panel, they were nurses that were brought from different parts of the United States during the tuberculosis epidemic, and when people did not know what to do. They were recruited from all over the United States, and primarily African American nurses, because many of the nurses that were here already left the job because that was such a scary disease. So in any case, it was a very, very challenging I think in the history is quite interesting because it reveals so many layers about the history of the United States, but also the social kind of aspect of all. So I was very fortunate to meet the last living Black angel, who's in the
Oh my
middle, one
God.
of the, yeah, and her name is Virginia Allen, and I built a long-lasting relationship with her. Here's a portrait of her that I made, an oil portrait of her that I made subsequently after the mural, simply because I felt like her story needs to continue to live on. And I imagine that just like murals become these places for of social storytelling, that maybe a gallery can kind of open up to this if there's a painting of someone like her exhibited in a gallery where she could come and be a part of it as well. So she really loved the idea. I asked her what she thought, and she said, I would love for you to do this painting, and then I would love to come and be someone that talks about the angels and keep that story alive. They were called the Black Angels because of how caring and kind and sweet they were by the patient. That was a name given to them by the patients. Um, so again, I absolutely, and she's 91, 90 years old. She'll be 91 next year. And yeah, I'm just extremely grateful and feel extremely privileged to have spent the time with her and to continue to be in touch with her. um,
That's really something. I mean, it's sort of like, it strengthens this idea that like things about your past, the way that you were brought up, the things that are important from like, when you're pint size, can manifest in, the work that you're doing here, the stuff that the newer thing, I think it's the newer thing that you're working on at Maimonides Hospital, and
yeah,
just
this
all of the
behind me.
other stuff.
Mhm.
I don't know. I find that fascinating. It's like where, like if you were somehow born someplace else and had like a different life, I mean, you wouldn't be doing this work. I mean, it has so much to
Maybe.
do with who you are. And I mean, I'm probably telling the audience what they already know, but like how many artists, and we could talk about this in a few minutes, how many artists do you really feel like reveal themselves in the work, or are they, and I feel like this is maybe something that's slightly more recent as far as art, but like people seem to be out to solve problems. It's like art as thesis, and like you seem to come from a much deeper emotional place, and I find it
Mm.
very, very like a positive thing. you know
Well, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I think the connection with people for me is very important, but also painting is a kind of, it's a process that I feel like it could be an act of care. It could be also an act of love, a gesture of care. Painting can be a process for empowering oneself, but also elevating oneself, but also elevating others with not just with the image, but also with the process, with the practice,
right.
with how you enact a conversation with someone to ask them. If I have visited Miss Allen, fortunate to have visited her in her home. And have these conversations. And similarly to some of the other work, this is just a little bit older, 2019, but this is my neighbor. So I love the one-on-one relationship, especially with people that are very close to me. So this is one of my neighbors who um, was um, was my basically my inspiration for this. Every time, it's funny, every time I walk by the storefront, I could see myself in the reflection, and I was thinking, I wonder what connects us. Like, how do we connect? Because we're also good friends. And so she's also from my friend here is also from an immigrant, economical migrant herself, and her daughter. And I really do relate to her daughter because I feel like that daughter myself as well. And we talk a lot about mountains and just the landscapes of the places where we come from. And I try to remove in the reflection here the whatever was on the other side of the Brooklyn street and replace it with the mountains that I know my small little tiny village is between four mountains, and so is her home. So I try to kind of listen to to her, but also listen to me and find that connecting point where it's a collaboration. What was very interesting is I spoke with her about, strength, like what does having strength mean to her, and if there's anything that I can bring a symbol that can carry on that strength in this painting. And she said, well, and I've tried to kind of bring the words of the people that are in these paintings on the right hand side here, but you could kind of see it. But she said, my friend, to leave everything not knowing and to have the courage and to have the courage and hope, that comes from strength, and basically to leave your country, your home, and then start your life over. You can't do that without an enormous amount of resilience and strength, and it's so beautiful. And I just, yeah, I wanted to kind of commemorate that moment a little bit. Maybe something similar happens. Another one here, by the way. I also make, so some of these are quite large, they're almost life size, and this is a smaller, these are smaller ones and more kind of
Okay. Yeah.
experimental. I call these like paintings of encounters. So I might have this very deep and beautiful conversation with someone just on the subway or waiting for to get on the ferry. And I just love that. And I'm like, I'm never gonna forget this person and what they're saying, because it's so powerful. It really touched my heart. So I've started making these little tiny paintings called paintings of encounters. It's
That's
someone I don't even know that I would ever see again.
so interesting. I mean,
Mhm.
I suppose
So
that is part and parcel of being a New Yorker, and because we do live in a place where we're constantly bumping into people that you could just as easily yeah, never see them again. And
Mhm.
so many interesting folks, and and for what we both do. If I don't know if this didn't get mentioned, but Yana teaches at like 17 different places.
No, just two.
19. And we work together at Montclair State, and
Yeah.
she also teaches in Manhattan. But I think of all the students too, and
Mhm.
where they come from, um, what they know, all of the it's like it's fascinating to think of, like, you look at a subway platform and it's just teeming with these stories, some of
Mhm.
which you might be able to talk about if you meet these people, and then other times just you know
Mhm.
I love this image. Kind of feels like it's floating, almost like
Yeah. Yeah.
illustrative of the nature of
Mhm.
fleetingness, or the memory, and
That that's beautiful what you said just a second ago. If I may just like kind of bring that point, because that was so maybe it's all about listening, right? Like how we listen
I
to
bet you
what,
do that better than I do.
well, no, but it's a listening of a kind of a listening maybe of people around us or in something in us. And maybe our practice can be an expression of that somehow. I don't know.
Yeah. Um, I tell you what, we can easily roll through a few more
Sure, a couple
images.
more. Yeah, I
Um,
can just show you guys a couple more here of that same. So this was a former student of mine. I have to say the color is not perfect, um, but it's a former student of mine who I did the exact same experiment. And I've started a whole experiment, meaning having a series of conversations, talking about something very deeply important to them. And this particular student I've had for many different in many different in a couple of different courses. Then they graduated, and now it was such a we had such a beautiful series of conversations over the years. And I wanted to kind of capture them because I felt that they were also quite empowering, and also talked about that heightened experience in our memories and our histories and our bodies. And it felt really close to my heart. So I brought this with a little bit of story about their father and their um basically their quest and their search for their sort of archive, family archive, uh, communal archive, community history, and then learning through them this amazing quote that it said, essentially love and justice are the same. And I just really love that as a quote. And it happened
That
that
is
it
a
was
really good.
around beautiful, yeah. And I think we probably can find this in throughout many different books as well. It's echoing throughout the literature, especially justice related work. But I just really love this image as in my mind, thinking, wow, if you approach things through that love as a verb, as bell hooks have so famously said, maybe things will be different. But I just really enjoyed trying to it, and then that's also a kind of for me an exercise of imagination too, because I'm not, as I was listening to some of the interesting, not just listening, but as we were both having a conversation, many images emerged to my head of this angel protector. And I kind of tried to bring that as a kind of wings in the back, and thinking about how does this symbolism that I've explored in my tapestry design, mural design based on tapestry designs, how does that come into the oil paintings in a way that really starts to kind of form into its own little language? I don't know how I have succeeded, but here, again, I don't know. This looks a little way too yellow here, but it is. It's a very strong, strong image. In this image, I actually collaborated with my mother, who, we've inevitably in the immigrant experience there is a lot of loss, a lot of grief that you can't grieve together with your family far away, and it's really, 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 really difficult and very deep, and my mother has been in that place herself, or all of us have been. But in this situation, I kind of wanted to create a project that would involve a longer collaboration with her, and a very strategic collaboration with her, so that we can understand more, so I can see something happen through that process. And I kept debating, do I paint her face detailed enough or not? Do I make this realistic or not? That debate is in my head like all the time. How far in the detail do I go? And
Why
how
is
far
it
do I
Yeah,
stand back?
why is it a debate? And by the way, and before you answer, to put you in the hot seat, maybe a
No, it's good.
couple minutes, and then we're gonna open up the room for
Sure.
Q&A, because I know people are gonna
Absolutely.
have a lot of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. So in what I did here, actually, I used some of these tapestry motifs in this image, and I just drew them in black and white to remove the color. And then I showed them to her in ways that I asked her to assign meaning to them, to kind of change the empowerment conversation. So it's not me as the artist who would do something kind of like magical and make her feel good, but it's really her herself who's assigning what kind of layers of meanings are happening in some of these symbols. And then me, the artist, right, goes in and thinks about how should this be arranged to kind of carry the stories that she told me. There was an interview process with her. We did color activities together. We did these like interesting exchanges of shapes and meaning assigning. And she has an amazing, I have to say, amazing imagination, because I showed her something literally that looks like a little square with a couple of off, like little lines next to it. And she was like, this is an important conference. About, I mean, I just loved her sheer imaginative power, and I feel like that moment was quite beautiful. So then I tried to think about what she said she believed was about new beginning, what was about something that was transformative, what she felt was more about nature, what she felt was more about community. And I tried in, you could kind of see in this area in the back here, I tried to kind of compose some of this, but I still feel my struggle, as we were talking about earlier, between this abstraction and more realistic renderings, since I've
Yeah,
been classically trained and I can make a more realistic rendering. It's easy for me to follow my tricks, of my, like, I can handle something quite
right.
realistic, but it's that imaginative and that more experimental, nuanced space that I would like to hopefully be better at.
Yeah.
um, and it's a search that I think it has to be collaborative. But in this particular piece too, I felt like, wow, I really want painting to be just like, I don't know if you have read some of the text by John Berger, who always says, you know, maybe in like certain crafts, we can think that the craft, as in here, it becomes a kind of form of prayer, a good wish for someone, right? Some we hope that they would have prosperity, with this being a gesture of offering a love, act of love. And it's the same thing, especially thinking with all of my portraits, these are people that I love, I cherish, and I want somehow those expressions to be um, visible and felt and tangible somehow. And I don't know, I don't know if I'm succeeding. What other images I can show you? Along the side, we did mention this quickly in our previous chat, Mike. And maybe I'm kind of taking that just to, for the sake of time, I'll share a little bit. But along the side of these more community based things that are in relationship to people very close to me in a neighborhood, or I also do a lot of work that's more experimental. So I don't know if I have a good example here, but on daily basis, I try to simply take watercolor, take gouache, and just play with it on a piece of paper and see what that does. And that's just as equally to me important, because again, it helps me explore my visual language, expand my visual language, hopefully. Um, and some things happen here that I feel relate to a story that then I might take and explore in something like this.
I really
Um,
like these little
yeah,
things that
thank
are
you. There's a few more. And they're not based on real photographic reference, and that's something I also try to kind of remove from my practice. How can I just paint from memory? And just the final thing I'm going to say, I did this painting 2019, last photograph I took of my grandmother before she passed away, and I really wanted to commemorate her somehow. And I was like, I'm just going to paint that last photograph. And in her um, I mean, her place where she lived was the same room, was like a kitchen and a bedroom and everything, you know, kind of. Um, and so I painted this, and then I was like, no, that's not her. And then I tried to remove the photograph, and I painted this painting as a way to kind of basically think, wow, um, I can just use my own head as my reference and my own emotions, and kind of continued on with that here and here and here and here. Yeah.
wow. That's yeah, it makes me think of oh geez. Berger's great for, I
Yeah,
think most people are
love
probably
him.
familiar with his like ways of seeing book that,
Hmm.
came from the series, but he's done it. I mean, he passed away, but
Hmm.
he did so many other things that like I feel
Yeah.
like, you know, but it makes me think of the I'll never remember his name, but the guy who wrote the book I Am a Camera.
Uh,
Um,
don't know that.
and what a great idea using your mind. I mean, it's like sometimes it's
That's
like,
a
oh,
reference, right?
right. Oh, we did all kinds of things before the internet. Um, and I think this is a good time for me to look at the chat because I keep, as I'm talking to you this whole time, I'm getting message after message like, oh my God, these are amazing. These are so beautiful. And, I heartily agree. Um, so I'm going to try to, let's see, how can I do this? Um, I'm looking at the participants now. Okay, now I'm just going to open up the chat. Aha. Okay, so there's a lot of people love this storytelling. This is so
Thank
beautiful.
you.
These are great.
Thank
Um,
you.
so our a fellow educator, my boss, my friend, fellow painter, Lori Ricadonna asked, I may have missed this, but do you plan your color palette, Yana,
Mm,
prior to creating the painting, or is there a little bit
absolutely.
of push pull like happening like as you work?
I love that question because color is so important to me. I do plan a lot the color. I think back to this idea of these gouache paintings that I make before every painting. I plan over and over, and I always think of a kind of general color that I attach either to a story, like one color that I attach to a story, which is very clear on this one. The kind of yellow for me was, that's the color I want to use. Um, and in other places, I have maybe two colors that are, but I always kind of have one main color that I want that color to be the main storytelling tool. And then I play around a lot with colors that may be adding to that story, if the color is a story itself, and then, or maybe distracting, or maybe helpful, or so color is a real, and if there's a moment where I just love to experiment, like where that sheer experimentation where I feel I'm kind of getting lost of what time it is, and it's those those relationships between colors. That's when I'm really planning that out. Yeah,
Hmm.
and at times I really don't succeed, and there are times in which I feel they're a little bit more successful than others. But I think that's such an ever evolving journey, and oh yeah, I love everything about color. Yeah. And
Um,
it's funny we say this because when I was studying, in fact, I was really interested in gray as a color, as something in between that had all these different nuances as a student and during my MFA, but I little by little lost it. And it
thank
just
God.
because I know, but I little by little I felt like I I think it was part of the mural work that helped me, because I love the process of the color combinations prior to making the big piece. And a lot of these, for example, in that piece, a lot of these are borrowed from the actual traditional tapestries. So then it was just a matter of understanding how they all flow together.
That's really interesting. I'm so glad that you sort of, got out of the gray zone. That seems like such a classic grad school thing.
Really,
Like
it's
I was doing this
true.
thing in grad school that was all about like theory, and I was using gray, and then I got out of grad school, and like, funnily enough,
I need to use
went out
my
and bought
color.
$1,000 worth of like the most luscious, Utrecht colors. Um, Let me ask you this, Michelle, uh, would love to know, like, um, things that that you haven't told us yet, like maybe specific artist or writers or poet like influences, like other than just like sort of like the obvious, like uh Bulgarian
Mhm.
like textiles and so forth.
Right.
Have you looked at other artists as like pretty direct, like, yes, there's something that really speaks to me, and blank, that this person
Mhm.
does it like really, or maybe not, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love. I mean, I feel like I maybe look at too much sometimes, and I do look at a lot of artwork with so much, it just so inspiring. I mean, the thinking about most recently, oh, I absolutely loved, I don't know what you guys thought if you saw the exhibition, the Alice Neal show.
I was
I
just
just
about to bring that up.
loved that.
Yeah.
I loved her more. I just loved the fact that she elevated people in such a beautiful way. But I honestly, I never really followed her work so much prior to the exhibition. I mean, I knew of her, but I became such a big fan of her practice. I also really like some other folks that are in different parts of the world. Um, Gosh, like where do I begin? I really enjoyed seeing the work of uh, her first name is Farah. Her last name I
Oh,
can't
Farah
remember.
Atassi.
Atasi, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
She's
yeah.
in France. She's originally, I think, um, comes from a different part of the world, maybe the Middle East. I want to be, I can't pinpoint it right now, but she was definitely an interesting person for me to think. Also, like understanding genre painting becoming something slightly different as well. And I really enjoyed that. So many, yeah. So it, but I tend to, I love the WPA. I did before working, well, in fact, working on this piece and the one that I'm doing right now, I spent hours at the research library at the Met Museum. I don't know if you guys knew that there is a library with archives and you can look at actual images, but they have beautiful books of archives of different public art, of WPA murals as well.
Wow.
Um, all, and I just really, really loved. doing some more research. And it's funny enough, there was one quote that really inspired me while I was started working on the mural that you kind of peeked through behind me. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Wall of Respect in Chicago, the Wall of Respect, which
Uh-huh.
was a community mural entirely painted by the community members themselves. Someone, an anonymous, I think, somehow was initiated, and it was famous. There were famous musicians, local artists, local people from the neighborhood. They were mostly African American, the African American community, just really beautiful, beautiful. And everything was painted in different style. And there's a famous quote that there was a teenager, a kid standing by the mural and looking at it for a long time. So someone asked the kid, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm just getting some energy." And I just love that so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of
Um,
like, I think that's why I like going to see art, right?
yeah.
I mean, you get energy from it
Hmm.
in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I'm trying to sort of see if there's
So
other,
in terms of inspirations, they could come from all over the spectrum of work.
um, yeah, I'm just trying to think if I'm bypassing some of the other questions. It's like I have these glasses. I'm allegedly I can the screen. Um, but okay, one new message here. Okay. Um, yeah, people are just like, oh, I love that Alice Neal show.
Oh,
Um,
thank you. Yeah, it was a
I have
great
a
show.
feeling, that's maybe a lot of people, and I think this is why Neil was like so overdue for like just like the full pull the stops out retrospective, is that what she does seemed, especially in New York, but I think you could probably say like any of the serious precincts of art in this country, that like storytelling was just so like gauche. It was like, oh, merely a storyteller. Um, and I think that's something that I think you're proof in the pudding. It's very powerful. And it's not just your story. Obviously, what makes these so fascinating is that like it's you connecting to other people with really great stories to tell. And it's not like generals in battle. You know, okay, I shouldn't swear. It's for my school, but it so angers me that like the stories that I was given as a kid were those kinds of stories. They were the big public stories. They were the mythologizing stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's so refreshing to get these like smaller stories that are actually huge. And I think
Mm-hmm.
Neil sort of like really typifies that relationship with the artist and the sitter. I love some of these paintings where you can see like a little bit of your sketchbook, or like you can see like you making the painting or the drawing like in the mirror, and it's like
Oh yeah.
you know yeah, that's a good. It's like you put yourself in there, and it's a nice nod to something that's like it's so obvious that people might not even think about it. It's like, yeah, every time you make work that has somebody else in it, it's a dialogue, you know
Hmm.
even
Yeah.
if like in so much of Neil's work, it's like, and my very 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 favorite painting of hers is like those two little kids that look like they're just about to jump out of their skin because they're so bored, and she's painting them, and like God knows how long they had to sit around and be like, they're like this, and his brother's like, um, and it's the most beautiful real
Mm.
piece. um, Maybe well, we only have like a couple of minutes left. Is there okay, I'm just sorry, kind of, it's hard to troll this go through the chat thing and stay present too. um any last thoughts that maybe we didn't hit on that you could just sort of like like for 1 minute
Mhm.
Anything that you like that we sort of like missed in the discussion?
Thank you. What can I say? Honestly, I feel no, I'm anything else. I don't know. It's a very hard work. I think we maybe didn't talk about just the challenges of when you are always thinking of or always kind of working with one more person or with a group of people,
Yeah,
whether for something more recent. Um, it can be also, hard work. I mean, it is hard work, but it also can feel very challenging of like, okay, how do I preserve my only my voice? Like what does that mean and how does that feel?
right.
So that's definitely something that, and I think a lot of it has to do with balance. So I have tried in many ways to do things that are very personal about my personal history and my personal kind of story. And at times it connects with others, and that's when it becomes interesting. And at times I just want it to be my exploration.
Sure.
um
I mean,
and I it
absolutely.
and I'm still, I guess I'm still trying to find that balance as you continuously evolve, as you're making, you continuously try to understand it. But it is so I was working for Groundswell Community Murals. I'm still part of the community, of course, but for years, since I came to New York, as a nonprofit public art organization. And for sure it was something that I always thought about, right? Like what's the ah like I'm going to listen to everyone. I going to try to bring whatever everybody wants in this painting. I will add that in, and then somewhere in that moment, depending on the, I guess, the timelines or the deadlines, you start to really get tired, right? You feel like, okay, that's, I need to take a break. So I think a balance between those things is very important. Um, and yeah, as long as I mean, so what I did is I stepped out of Groundswell, decided to take a couple of, a few moments apart, and then I started realizing, wait a minute, now I'm bringing all of this into those tactics into my work. So there's something that is pretty much drawing me into that kind of community space or that collective thinking or making or iterating. I said I was not going to say the word, but I did. More
Ideation,
design,
ideation,
ideation, more
ideation.
design
We'll
language.
just say it. Um,
So anyway.
no, I think that, that's a good sign, right? That, if
Mhm,
you very consciously take this stuff, then it's meaningful and you don't have to
mhm.
feel like, ugh, the commercial world. If it, if it, what's the expression? If it sticks to the wall or something or blah, 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 I don't know.
I don't know.
Um, Yana, thank you very, very much for the talk. And I know everyone really enjoyed your work. If somehow I missed someone's question, my apologies. But thank you guys very much for coming. And I know that you know, out of all the things you can do on a Friday night, this is only one of them. So I really appreciate that everyone wanted to hang out in this little Zoom room and talk about art and talk about Yana's art. A couple of things before we go. Again, I'm not even sure if she's still here. Oh, she is. Thank you to Michelle Vitale for sort of like running this whole show. And of course, thank you to Summer for making this thing much, much smoother. And for instigating this idea of like the archive. And then also thank you to Esperanza for being here tonight. November 12th, if I'm not mistaken, Friday, November 12th. I'll be speaking with Esperanza Media Orbit. One more time. Meja Obre. I believe that's how she pronounces her last name. And we'll be doing the same thing that we've been doing tonight with Yana. And I really, really look forward to that. That'll be the third of 4 episodes or shows for this semester. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I really had a great time tonight, Yana. And I guess this is like when we wave to everybody. Say,
Thank you so much.
have a
Thank you,
great weekend,
everyone. Thank you,
everybody.
Michelle. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, it's been a blast. And if you guys are, looking for something to do over the weekend, Sunset Park, Brooklyn Army
Oh, yeah.
Terminal,
1
go
to
see the
5.
studios. You can see some of this awesomeness in person at Yana. So it'll be great. Okay,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next month,
Bye.
hopefully, for Esperanza. Okay. Bye,
Yay,
y'all.
thank you.